In January this year, one of the biggest threats for the survival of the brick and mortar model of business globally was e-commerce. Today, it is a global virus that keeps people away from public places. It's also a recession that's dampening consumer spend and purchasing power, and an individual sense of all-round sustainability. Although most consumers weren't affected because of a strong e-commerce infrastructure, a significant number of mainly offline retailers were at risk. This represents an urgent call to action for landlords and governments to provide a lifeline for struggling malls. Today, we look at the future of retail and how companies can adapt, delving deeper into how consumer preferences could further disrupt the retail sector, moving beyond buzzwords like digital transformation, and finding out if shoppers will ever return to malls in the capacity that they used to before COVID. I think in the United States, we'd seen that almost 630,000 outlets had been forced to close. Large department stores like Gap, Kohl's, and Macy's are laying off almost all of their employees. And in the United Kingdom, we saw Debenhams and Oasis have entered administration in recent weeks. So I'm going to start with you, Christoph, at this point. What would you say is the state of the Middle East's retail sector?
Previously, maybe hold-up brands were not that keen on having one-on-one conversation with customers online, are kind of changing their minds and trying to go online as quick as possible and finding the right way to talk to their customers. So there's a duality to the situation, and I think what is very interesting in the Middle East is that we have some of the most demanding customers who are really used to top-notch experiences in probably some of the most amazing malls in the world, right? The real question for retailers is, given this context, how can you kind of translate that amazing experience in the digital channels, and how can you keep your retail stores relevant today for your consumers and probably in the future as well?
Right, so Christoph, just coming at the back of that, earlier this year, this was pre-pandemic, Shalhoub announced that 60 of your stores were shutting down, and one of the main reasons you mentioned was because you wanted to grow your e-commerce presence. Was that the only reason, or was it also because you saw that these retail stores weren't really performing as well as you expected?
So there was a very good interview with our CEO who was talking quite openly about our strategy and how we want to put the customer at heart, and we need to follow what our customers dictate. We have to listen to our customers. So if more and more of our customers are considering moving to digital channels, we need to put our money into the right place. We need to focus on these areas. And yes, he did announce that a number of stores were closing, 18 in the beauty vertical, but some of these, to be frank, were already considered before Covid-19. And it's part of an overall strategy that really wants to focus on what matters most in order for us to be able to delight our customers.
Amazon, for example, is in the process of hiring 175,000 employees to keep up with the demand that there is right now, and this is global numbers. Dubai-based Majid Al Futtaim, which operates about 27 shopping malls, such as Mall of the Emirates, of course, has seen a surge in online sales with a 59% year-on-year increase in online customers in just March 2020, which is again when the lockdown happened. Saudi Arabian retailer Bin Dawood Holding has seen a 200% increase in its online sales since the escalation of COVID-19. So right now, Isabella, e-commerce retailers or your own e-commerce platform, what is the one thing that you would suggest? So if you didn't understand what I meant by this is, would you rather have all of these giants getting on their own e-commerce platforms like what Noon's done with Noon Daily, or Dubai Mall has basically gone on to Noon's platform? Or would you want them to start their own e-commerce platforms? What is more advisable?
It's a very interesting question, and just talking about some numbers, as Hiba started saying, we as a technology provider, we also saw a growth of more than 400% in terms of usage in our platform, which is massive. And as Christopher was saying, it's very interesting to understand that the brands or the companies who already had a digital transformation strategy before the COVID, they are in a much more comfortable position right now. So the companies who were not looking for e-commerce or digital strategies before, they are just feeling the FOMO, let's say, feeling of missing out things, and they started embracing technology, forward technology, without even thinking strategically about it. So these buzzwords such as AI, we were just talking about the readiness to adopt AI, AR, blockchain, and so on, they all sound very nice, but you have to be very strategic when you think about the technologies that you are adopting for your business model. And of course, we have to do a diagnosis, let's say, to understand what you are looking for when you are adapting and implementing new technologies to your company. When it comes to e-commerce, as you said, I think it doesn't matter if it's just a conglomerate or it's per brand or how you decide to do it, as long as it makes sense for your audience and for your business strategy. What I'd like to highlight though is that although we are seeing a shift, like an enormous shift towards e-commerce, it's important to keep it humanized. So it's important to keep the human element out there and not just leave the whole interaction and the experience in the hands of chatbots or other bots, because we can lose interaction and we can lose very important data and relationship that the brands took so long to get.
We've seen a sort of pivot to address urgent public health needs by a lot of global luxury brands. For example, factories have produced scarves and perfumes in the past. They are now manufacturing face masks and sanitizers. There are so many examples out there in the luxury sphere itself. And many luxury groups have also made monetary donations to hospitals, and that is sort of their marketing strategy at this point. Heba, my question to you right now is that sort of shift we are expecting in the luxury retail sector, especially in the near future?
Well, we notice actually within our portfolio of brands that a lot of brands are already right now adjusting to the demand of the customer demand, and we're staying very close to the customer. So we even now doing wedding masks because people want to get married and there is social distancing happen. So now we have to manufacture wedding masks. But the question will come: will that be a long term, for the industry? So I think it's just a short term to adjust and capitalize on the opportunities for some brands to respond very closely to what the customer wants and delivering at the promise.
The beauty industry generally in the past few years has grown at a pace that is at the speed of light. We every day, especially in Egypt, we get a new brand that is popping out into the scene, but moreover because it's killing traditional bigger brands. So for example, like Lancôme and Saint Laurent, and you have the big retail spaces such as Sephora and so on, they're really struggling because the brands that they actually carry don't meet today's customers' tastes. And so you have all these new, really cool niche cult brands that are responding to customers' needs and wants. And so yes, growing at a really quick pace. Brands are being very responsive because today's customers become super intelligent. They're high tech. They know exactly what they want, and the brands are responding to that and developing products to cater for that.
One of my interns woke up on a day off after 2 months of not having a single day off, and one of his days off, and not because we asked him to, he volunteered to not take weekends. He woke up early morning and identified that there's a delayed order. He got access to a car, drove to Ajman from Dubai on his own expense, found the customer where the customer lives from a close by flower shop, bought a bouquet of flowers and chocolates, personally apologized to this customer for the delay, delivered the order, offered a refund, offered a percentage discount on the next order, handed over the bouquet of flowers and chocolates, and then drove back. And what is remarkable about this, that this gentleman didn't even mention it. When I found out about it, obviously I wanted to compensate him for his time, his travel, his expenses, and he refused and argued with me. And when I see that coming from an intern that he starts to believe and breathe and live that customer-centric focus on whatever it takes, we have to delight the customer, I'm very hopeful that we're not talking about survival, we're talking about thriving. And we need to make sure that every single person has this customer centricity. There's not going to be any issue at all.
That's a very interesting point you mentioned there, Christophe. So right now we're talking about this whole personal involvement and this personal touch. Isabella, then when you're talking about the online sphere, isn't that one thing that's lacking? So like Christophe just mentioned about his intern personally going there with the bouquet and chocolates or whatever to deliver. You don't really get that online. You don't even know who you're interacting with. Sometimes, like you mentioned, it could be a bot. It's not even a real human being. So how do you get that personal touch online?
I love this question. First, we have to understand why the boutiques, they exist, and why, for example, when you walk in a Prada boutique in Soho in Manhattan, you have these amazing marble places with it's a merge between fashion and gallery arts. always to entertain and pamper their clients, right? So when you go to the brick and mortar stores, especially for the luxury, it's all designed to delight the clients. But to bring the same experience online, it's quite challenging. So with the lockdown, we saw that there is coming like a different way to look into entertainment and how to delight your clients. A good example that we can see is in China. So in February, Nike were hosting a lot of live streams with bloggers, and they managed to close the quarter, for example, with 36 plus in terms of increase in sales in China during lockdown in February. Bringing to a more realistic, let's say, point of view here in the region, we are very proud to work with Charles, but Christoph was just mentioning this human touch before. Together we have developed this concept of digital concierge, where we are creating customized platforms for brands, and we are creating an environment so the clients can have one-on-one sessions, customized sessions with the beauty and fashion experts. This is a completely different level of entertainment and engagement. So together since March, we managed to deliver more than 6,000 hours of one-on-one sessions with clients around fashion and makeup. And I think this is like engaging with the clients in an online environment. It's making the most out of the online shopping experiences with your clients. So I think that's what we have to look for, is how we can actually give them this exclusive concept and to keep pampering and delighting them, but in an online space.
Actually, I wanted to add a point to that, which I find really interesting. I hope, sorry, you don't find me interrupting you. But retail experience, generally in retail stores, you know, from past experiences, I used to work at Harrods for a very long time. When you walk into a beauty department store, especially on the ground floor, you know, the music's very loud. There's a lot of things happening. They make it super exciting, and you feel like you don't want to miss out. You want to sort of hang out there. And the reason why they do that, especially with music, is they want to keep you there for longer, the customer, because, you know, you want to try on this lipstick, you want to have a new makeover, and there's constantly one booth after the other that creates this incredible vibe. And so retail theater is very, very important. And so when you have that in brick and mortar and then you have tech, how do you bring the two together? It's really difficult to touch on these points.
Do you not feel like right now the way it's happening, it's very haphazard? They're doing it just because the lockdown happened suddenly, and then they weren't really doing it the right way because the brands weren't ready. And like we were discussing with Isabella earlier, so digital transformation, AI, blockchain, they've just been buzzwords for so long. And right now everybody's jumping on the bandwagon without really knowing how to use it to their full potential.
Shopify is an interesting answer to your question. It became the go-to destination for retailers to have a quick, and it's not going to be quick, it's going to be a somehow permanent presence online. Because it's difficult to your point, it's difficult to build engineering capabilities overnight. It's a lot haphazard. Still get a lot of discussions and calls about how can we go online quickly. And my answer is, if you're just selling something, go on Shopify. If you're serious about transformation on the long run, then let's talk. But the problem is a lot of the incumbents don't put the capital behind it or don't acquire. I mean, if you look at the acquisition landscapes in the MENA region for e-commerce, Dubai Malls has bought Macy, which was a $350 million acquisition. You've had a couple of companies going IPO. Not a lot of M&A happening on that front. I think incumbents still prefer to build themselves. We'll still have to see whether that strategy works or not at scale, right?
I fundamentally agree with what he said, that for brands that want to do a quick fix, Shopify is, I think, a great start. But if you want to do a proper transformation, you need to make some investments. And I have an amazing colleague, Daniel, he joined us from Inditex, and he has great examples. Inditex, until 2022, is going to close 1,200 stores just to be able to invest $1.1 billion into e-commerce in the next 2 years. And even more surprisingly, they're investing $1.7 billion in retail stores to have full integration with their e-commerce, unleash omnichannel experiences that are going to be probably some of the best in class globally, bringing customers together from multiple channels. It's really impressive, right? And this is what I think Walid was pointing towards, that if you want to do a serious digital transformation, you have to make very difficult strategic choices, have the right investments, the right people, and a very focused mindset, which is much more than just unleashing, one website. And yes, it takes a lot of investment in human capital, building that up now.
We've seen VAT coming into the region, and it's relatively new. And then we've seen again, Oman might introduce it in 2021. The rest of the GCC will have it by 2021 for sure. Would you say now is the time to rethink that entire tax model at this point? Christoph, my question is for you, and I want to know if probably removing that whole element and promoting tax-free shopping would perhaps bring back the shoppers?
I don't think the shoppers have gone anywhere. It's not about bringing back the shoppers. It's about staying relevant to the shoppers, right? So if you cannot answer why a customer should not buy the same product from the gray market, you have an issue as a brand and as a value proposition. And that goes back to your business model, right? If you cannot justify why you're more expensive, your customers will find a way to get access to cheaper, the same selection or comparable selection, or find other ways to satisfy their needs. So you need to have a very honest look in the mirror and see, how am I going to be relevant to my brands? What is it my customers ask and demand from me? Now, whether tax-free shopping is the solution, I mean, I don't think that our friends in Dubai duty free did any better in COVID when there was a full lockdown, pun intended, right? So if there's things are not moving, even if you're in the right place, being tax-free doesn't save you. It goes more to the business model, goes to the value proposition, goes to how seriously you are taking your transformation and making the right strategic choices in very, very difficult questions. When
you have blockchain, we're talking about AI, etc. At this point, is this for the closer future? Is it worth investing in at this point when we're faced with an immediate pandemic? Or should we leave it for later and focus on the more immediate issues?
It's a nice thing to say, I'm AI powered or I'm blockchain powered. It just doesn't really mean much. What's interesting is what do you do with it, and what business questions do you answer? So on that topic, honestly, what I look for is business results. In e-commerce in particular, and I go back to this, the analytics. If we were between 2007 and 2013, 14, I would have been really excited about the opportunities. But come mid 2010s and 2015s onward, all of these analytics games have been clearly owned by the big platforms. So as a small guy trying to make a sense out of those worlds, you can build a lot. Where your disadvantage is for machine learning capabilities to give you the data that you need, you really need large data sets to make sense out of it.
Back in 2018, the Chinese consumers took more than about 115 million trips. This was one of the reports I read by McKinsey & Co. And these were just for luxury shopping trips. We've obviously seen a huge fall in those numbers. And when you talk about Dubai alone, the Chinese tourists and shoppers had actually left. And we were talking about the Russians and Chinese coming back in 2019. Again, 2020 happened and they've left again. So where is the entire future of brick and mortar shopping?
I guess we have to stop consuming like we do. I mean, it's completely unsustainable and stupid. And if we're gonna go and keep on pushing, shoving luxury and items in people's throats, it's not something that's cool anymore. So I guess you have to redefine how this whole buying, mania and push it means, and what does that mean for the good thing about recessions that makes you think about these things. And I guess there's also a trend that's going to come out of that. People would wanna. We lived the extent of consumerism to a point where it became unsustainable and ridiculous. And I guess the luxury industry has to rethink that. I'm not a luxury expert, but that would be my initial reaction to. And what are those new generations are going to buy? I mean, you're talking about younger generations. I mean, I guess all of us are growing out of that and moving into different ways of owning and buying and accessing and sharing and recycling. And I wish I had an answer. I'll be running a luxury company.